And so today we actually have taken what we think we're really good at in terms of running the design, build, test, analyze application development cycle like nobody else, but also added to it breakout growth initiatives that allow us to go into high growth markets with favorable dynamics where we can solve important problems using the competencies that we have. So that's really what we've worked at over the last couple of years. So what was important to doing that, and I don't want to pretend that we're done, but we've made a major shift in our portfolio, and I'm quite confident that we've made a measurable difference. So first of all, and this is kind of trite, right? Being really good at innovation means making sure you're making these strategically aligned choices, executing impeccably, and bringing in new and better tools and training people and helping them gain the experiences necessary to do it again even better. And so that's really what it's all about. And it sounds really simple when we put it up like this, and my boss looks at me and says, "So that's all you're doing?" But of course, I think many of you know it's a little harder than that. We did get some help in that the structure of the new specialty company is very lean in terms of a corporate core, cutting out layers of bureaucracy that might have slowed decisions in the past. We've also worked to not be bound by the DuPont Oval, to actually reach out a lot more, bring in a lot more new materials, develop solutions with a variety of technologies, not just our own. And for that, the first step, and I'll just take these sort of one at a time, was to make sure that our R&D, our science and technology portfolio was well aligned with strategy. And so the first step, I firmly believe that it all has to start with business strategy. And sometimes the business has a good one, and sometimes the business pays lip service to it. But we've really pressed our businesses and those brands that I told you about, our lines of business, into providing some rigor. And I happen to like the playing to win strategy that Roger Martin has articulated, though I realize there are lots of others that maybe you use and are happy with. I just will tell you what we've done. And yeah, I don't work for Roger Martin, but it's something that we found very effective, because it starts by forcing you to really understand what is your winning aspiration, what's your vision that's going to deliver the outcome that ultimately you and your shareholders want. Then where are you going to play? How are you going to win? What's your entitlement there? What capabilities do you need to have to make that effective? And ultimately, how are you going to manage the whole thing? So it lays it out in a really clear cascade. It's easy to seamlessly then add in things like, okay, a supporting technology strategy, or how does this work with the other businesses in our safety and construction business unit, that sort of thing. But whatever you choose, what we've found is that it's then really important for a science and technology organization to take the where to play and how to win dimensions and look at them in terms of a technology roadmap where we're articulating each one of those things that we say are really, really critical in a temporal domain, so that you can then start to see, well, where are your programs today? Are they all clustered in one area, and we have other things that we said are really critical that we're ignoring? Do they have an equal distribution across time domains, so you're going to be refreshing the product line continuously? Are they a balanced mix of the things that you've said are absolutely critical to succeed? So that was, I would say, a major piece of work for us, but we got it done, and I think it's done a couple of things for us. One is, as I alluded, it lets you say, okay, is my portfolio balanced? Am I working on all the right things? Probably even more importantly, did I have things I was working on that really don't fit with my strategy? Hard to kill some of those things. They have a zombie life of their own. But again, that's something that's really important if you're going to succeed. And I guess the other thing that it does for you is it says, okay, I've got some real gaps in a certain place. I need to really put my efforts into designing a solution for the future there. So it does some really good things for you. What it doesn't do is stop and say, just because something might be aligned with strategy, it's the right thing to be doing. And what I found in our portfolio was that it was way too incremental. It had way too many things clustered in certain places, and so not all of them are the right things to do. Well, how do you take the next step in making choices among those alternatives. And so for us, that really became the next step, which was strategic portfolio management. For that, we looked at our portfolio and said, okay, what are the problems? And we identified three main areas. One is that we had low aspirations. We were looking at refreshing the brand, yes, but we weren't really looking at driving growth the way that we needed to. Secondly, clutter. Our portfolio was cluttered with lots of things that overlapped and lots of things that we started but really hadn't staffed for success. We also found wounded projects. I guess that's the example of wounded projects where we're working on too many things, and all of them we say are equally important, and so we starve them all. And that was a real problem in our portfolio. So what do we do about that? Well, our traditional approach to this had been the MOAS approach. Anybody familiar with that? The mother of all spreadsheets? Yeah, scientists and engineers in the company, yeah, we love our spreadsheets. And in fact, that's what we were using to try and get our arms around this portfolio, and it doesn't work. I think, anybody tried that before? Yeah. Did it work for you? No. Didn't work for us either. And the problems are things like keeping versions straight, making sure that the people who have to have access and keep the spreadsheet up to date actually can access it, while people who need to use it for other purposes can access it. It's just a total mess. So instead, we said we need a tool that's, first of all, a relational database, and secondly, something that is really parametric rather than again, entering thousands of pieces of data. And we looked at a lot of alternatives, and the one that we liked, that we thought might do it for us was the Portfolio Navigator by SmartOrg. And again, I don't work for David either, but I'm just telling you what we've done and what's worked for us. And the nice part for me, anyway, not necessarily all the people that had to use the tool, but I think ultimately we got there, is that it asks a relatively small number of questions about how big an opportunity is and how hard it's going to be, so that you can then start to get the information you need about individual projects. Once you've done that, the system does all the discounted cash flow calculations for you. It does the real options evaluations and helps you with lots of visualization tools. The other thing that we did, and I took a look at this and said, hey, we're smart people, and Ashok and Rich, we ought to be able to do this ourselves, right? And they came back from some training and said, yeah, no, you're wrong. We need more help. So we engaged SmartOrg to help us also with the process that they use. And I have to admit, being skeptical going in, I will say that a couple of things were invaluable in helping our business leadership get on board with this. Because keep in mind, if you're talking about a major shift in your portfolio, you're likely going to be goring somebody's pet project. And in fact, there are probably going to be some influential people who are having their projects gored and the whole balance of their portfolio, and you're going to threaten people by saying, yeah, we're going to do some things in a longer time domain that are going to have a bigger payoff, but it's going to mean you're going to struggle. You're not going to have all the support you did for the incremental stuff. So lots of potential problems, and a couple of things made a big difference for us. One was, as you would expect, the tool provides good visualization of how to ask questions about your portfolio. Secondly, there's a game that David, I think, is going to run. Where's David? You're going to run the portfolio game this afternoon?
I'll run the game this afternoon.
This afternoon.
It's
So
in the schedule, but it's going to be game on.
So it astounds me still, but that is something all of our business leadership still talks about. And then thirdly, we had a dispassionate consultant who's seen a lot of portfolios, didn't really have a stake in whether we succeeded or failed, quite frankly, and was able to tell us the unvarnished truth about our portfolio. So we ran the process, and it involved, first of all, entering data on our projects, and that was the first place that we got some help by looking at what the projects were and whether they really were representing the opportunity space, and they weren't. I'll just tell you that up front. Second was to make sure that we calibrated everything, all of our assumptions across the entire portfolio for each line of business, and then for safety and construction as a whole. To make sure that we really were putting our resources, our money, our people where they could have the biggest impact. And that meant making, again, some hard choices that not everybody liked. And then getting into decision meetings where you're fraught with the possibility that people won't like the decision, again, if you're either de-emphasizing their business or their project or whatever, and then making sure that you can sustain that gain. And so having a partner in this really did help us in that regard. And we were asking questions like, is the project big enough? Does it represent a productive use of our resources? Is it material to our 5-year plan? And ultimately, does it adequately balance risk and reward? And does our portfolio as a whole, as a result, do that? So that's really what we set about doing. And to start with, at the project level, I'm going to give you some examples from our Korean design portfolio. It's one of our lines of business, and it's I won't say the portfolios were all a little bit different and all had different challenges, but I'm going to go through some of the challenges that are faced in each one. And to start with, as we started to enter projects, and then we looked at them as a leadership group in that calibration session, we said, wow, I thought this project, which was showing up on the left, had bigger potential than this, and why is it so small? And when we dug into it, I kid you not, it was a new grade, ultra tough version that could be made in very thin slices and used in lots of different applications. But the project manager was so focused on one application that we were ignoring everything else. And secondly, the project owner was saying, well, I have this one customer and this one need, and I don't care that they're paying $35 to $50 for the solution that they have today. If we get 50 cents for the amount of material we're selling, we'll be really happy with the margin. And just say, pull out your gun, lift your foot, and pull the trigger, because that's what you're doing here. So the net effect was we were able to get past that. We were able to start looking at what the upside potential is. And it didn't make a small difference in many of these projects. It didn't make like a 20 or 30% improvement in the expected value. It made, in this particular case, which is unusual, a 10x difference in the value of the project. And in addition, if you look at it, the very worst case scenario for the project, if all of the downsides come through in the tornado, is still better than the expected value we started with. So something that I think is really powerful for us is this allowed us to free up our thinking, get a lot more customers involved, a lot more excitement about opportunities, and to really launch something with scale that otherwise we would have likely been too focused on a narrow application in order to make it succeed. So we've done that, and when you look at it, we actually had a number of projects in the portfolio where that was a problem. Not all of them, and when we were able to then compare projects to projects, it did make a material difference because it showed us where the value and where the upside potential was in our portfolio. The other thing, of course, that you might be looking at this portfolio and asking is, well, okay, most of the value in your portfolio is inherent in these 6 projects. Why are you doing these down here? And the honest answer is, well, some of them we're doing, and we should stop. The other answer, though, is that this is our growth portfolio. We have a base business where if you are going to continue participating in that base business, you need to do some things to maintain the business. And these NPVs that we're using and plotting against what the opportunity is don't adequately represent the cost of doing nothing. And actually, that's one of the main problems I think we all have experienced with NPVs, is that it's a valuable tool for new opportunities, but it misses some things. So there are reasons for doing some of them, and others ought to be stopped. Another thing we observed in the portfolio, and this is again the before portfolio, is that Pareto was right. If you look at it, about 80% of the value of our portfolio was going to be delivered by about 20% of the resources. This is a cumulative resources needed to complete projects versus cumulative NPV plot. Each program is represented by a stick with a terminus as a circle, or as SmartOrg likes to say, lollipops. And what you see is exactly that. And again, you might look at some of these and say, oh, easy decision, let's just kill these. Not so easy decision. Tools will allow you to jump to conclusions, but if they do that, instead of teeing up what the real important discussions are, they're the wrong tool for you. So for us, this teed up those decisions, and the after portfolio looks substantially different. It's not linear, but on the other hand, it doesn't have the dramatic break point that you see on the starting place that we had. We also looked at risk versus reward, and again, any one of these dimensions could if you just took it at face value, tell you to do one thing that might have consequences in another dimension. So it's important to look at all of these things together. And what we found, again, this is now a standard plot of market adjusted net present value against the probability of succeeding, probability of success. And it's a typical 4-box plot, right? Where the easy projects that aren't going to really move the needle, but we're pretty sure we can bring them home, are in the upper left quadrant. They're called bread and butter projects. If we had any that were really easy, that could really transform the business, they would be called pearls in the upper right quadrant. I don't have any there for this particular business unit, but we did have a number of what are called oysters, things that can really fundamentally change the business, but they're hard, and most of them will probably fail. And then we had a significant number of things that are really hard, but even if we bring them off, aren't going to really make a material difference. So we call those white elephants, and maybe it's our technical history where we know we can solve really tough problems. I don't know what it is, but we had a significant population across our portfolio of white elephants. So obviously what we've done to try and declutter is to say, okay, how many bread and butters do we need in relationship to how many transformative programs? What's the time frame that each of these are going to deliver over? I didn't show you that plot, but that's another piece of the puzzle that we need to be mindful of. And basically, how many white elephants can we shoot? So that's what we've done. And what you see is the before and after portfolios. And we have, in fact, shot a bunch of white elephants. This dotted line shows an example where we unlocked the upside potential in a program and took it from white elephant territory into something that's still hard, still could fail, but on the other hand, it's worth investing in, because if it comes across at the expected value, it'll really make a material difference to this business. So that was really the effort that we went through. We went through it line of business by line of business, and then looked at it across the entire stake and construction portfolio. And what we've done by killing a bunch of white elephants and also rebalancing the portfolio, not doing everything that we might like to do in the bread and butter category, it's allowed us to free up people to staff programs for success. And what you happen to see here are how many technical resources were absolutely needed for the projects that we wanted to do, and how many we actually had. Marketing was even worse, where we needed a lot more than we had. So we've done some shifts of people, but we've also freed up people by stopping a bunch of things that aren't as high a priority. Really hard, right? Really dangerous territory, because you're killing somebody's important project. But in fact, when we did retrospective analysis and said the portfolio in my line of business has been decluttered, we had 75% of the people saying, yes, I strongly agree, or I do agree, and we had less than 10% who said, yeah, I don't agree. So I look at that as a real win in terms of the overall process. So this is what our portfolio process and see looks like today, the growth portfolio, I should say. And you might be looking at it and saying, why so many white elephants? And for those, I want to tell a little bit of a story. We have now dedicated efforts to scouting to try and enrich the portfolio. And in so doing, we recognize that a lot of the value propositions that we uncover and recommend are not going to work. And these are some examples of something that we went in with and said, hey, we think there's a great value proposition. It's probably going to be an oyster. And instead, we've conducted something we call the learning machine, where we partner a commercial person and a technical person together. Their only job for the next 100 days is to go conduct 100 interviews across the entire supply chain and come back and tell us, simply tell us, does the value proposition hold up? Is actually the value larger than we thought, or is it smaller? And what we found is that between 80 and 90% of the ideas are white elephants, and only 10 to 20% actually graduate into our portfolio. Which again, half full person, I look at that and say we killed 80 to 90% of the white elephants before we even started staffing the project. So again, I look at that as a real victory. The portfolio does still have substantial bread and butter programs in order to support our brands and continue to keep them refreshed, but it also has a more healthy population of oysters. Probably need more, but ultimately what we've been able to do then is complete what I call the virtuous cycle. Yeah, we have a strategy. We know what our aspiration is, where we're going to play, how we're going to win. We've translated that into the technology portfolio, which, first of all, I should have said earlier, science and technology is an important part of our innovation strategy. It's not the only part, and I think you all know that. We've looked at the technology roadmaps, and we've pulled out anything that doesn't fit, and more importantly, we're asking questions before we start a new project of whether it fits with strategy. And if it doesn't, and yet people say, but it's really important, we have to go back and revisit strategy. But nevertheless, once we've done that, we can then look at the portfolio and say, will it meet our aspirations? And in 4 of the 5 lines of business, the answer was actually yes. The reworked portfolios will reach the business aspirations for growth in a high growth specialty company that's innovation driven. One of them, significant work still to do, and the progress that the team has made recognizing the opportunities and where they are today has been, I would say, remarkable. So really good outcome in that regard. And I guess what you have to do is when you get that answer, you have to go back and say, will it meet my aspiration? And if it does, great, you execute like crazy. If it doesn't, you have to say, okay, do I need to revise my aspiration? Do I need to take more risk in my portfolio? Do I need to spend more? So those are the kinds of things that you have to go back and do. So still hard work to do. And then we haven't even gotten to the, okay, it'll meet our aspirations, but are our aspirations big enough? Can we do more? So that's the next challenge for us. But for now, we're working on executing what we've got. The other thing that I'll point out to you is that we're not, again, talking about a 20 to 30% improvement in the portfolio. By decluttering and stopping things that were going to make this big a difference in favor of some things that will make a bigger difference, and that we can get across the goal line faster with a higher probability of success because we're actually staffing them, made a big change in the portfolio. In addition, recognizing that we could drive the upside of projects by incrementally staffing those projects and getting a much bigger return for that incremental investment made a huge difference for us. It wasn't 20 or 30%. This is SmartOrg did some Monte Carlo simulations of what our old portfolio could have delivered in terms of outcomes and what our new one is looking like in terms of the expected value. And you can see it's more like a factor of 2 to 3, not 20 or 30% improved. So it's only when you start to add in the oysters that you get up to something that can actually meet our goal. You have to put in some breakout growth opportunities more than we had been in order to achieve the desired outcome. The other thing that I pointed out is that if a lot of those risky programs will fail, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. But if only 1 or 2 of them actually realize the upside that we've envisioned for them, which is, as you saw, asymmetric, the portfolio will blow away the expectations, and so that's of course something else that we're mindful of. We went back and wanted to make sure that this would have some sticking power. So we went back to the organization and asked people hard questions about the portfolio. Have we decluttered it? Have we made a material change? Am I more confident in the portfolio? And basically, what you can see is we went from on a 1 to 7 scale. We increased people's confidence in general. And these were 95 people that responded to a survey, so we got like 80%, I think it was, or something, return on it. So widespread agreement across the organization that we did the right things, and even line of business by line of business, you can see it was across the board. It wasn't just in one area where they're happy with it. Even the portfolios that we changed the most, people came out saying, yeah, that was the right thing to do. So again, I think being able to show them why it was the right thing to do was really important to getting the buy-in in order to move forward and not have a bunch of zombies hiding below the surface. Got a lot of comments in the surveys too. What went well? People saw that the output's been good for seeing growth opportunities. It brought teams together, got them thinking about the drivers of opportunities without getting caught in the weeds of a spreadsheet model. We're able to make decisions we've been avoiding, so some good things. There were some things that didn't go so well. It was pointed out that a lot of our venture projects were too speculative at this stage to really understand the spread of possible outcomes was too broad in these white space opportunities to really make sense of where they were in the portfolio, and we were probably better off getting more information before we actually counted on them for certain deliverables. What did we learn? Again, that the high risk, high return part of our portfolio is indispensable, and we need to improve both how we generate them, how we cultivate them, so that they can turn into pearls as the probability goes up. What still puzzles you? How do we connect our routine so that we can be tactical and get stuff done and still create space for the breakout innovation? And that's something that I think we wrestle with. You know, you need a certain set of skills to bring bread and butter programs home for your customers. You need other types of skills to manage these high risk, high return type of programs. And that's something that we have to be mindful of and make sure that we're not trying to apply one tool in terms of execution to everything. In addition, how do we keep this up is basically what this one says. How do we keep strategic thinking going and not get pulled back into the dysfunctions of simplistic operational thinking and short-term firefighting? How do we sustain the game? And that is something that I worry about daily, that Rich and Ashok worry about daily, because I think people have understood intellectually that we can't go back to where we were, but habits, culture, hardest thing to change, most impactful if you do. So one of it, you might imagine, a couple of the things that are my priorities for the coming year are to make sure that we keep this in front of people and that we are much more aggressive about our scouting efforts and developing an even richer portfolio for the future. Better execution is the next piece. And you might ask, well, why did you go after all of the portfolio stuff first? A couple of reasons. One is that a lot of consultants looked at our track record and said, well, yeah, execution isn't your problem. You guys execute like the guillotines in the French Revolution. Yeah, what you really need to be doing is getting people to work on things that will make a difference. So that's part of the reason why we did. We got some independent advice in that regard, but they were right. But the other is, my own philosophy is that if you're not working on the right things, then all the execution skills in the world won't get you to where you need to be. So for me, the first step was getting the portfolio right, and then applying tools to make us even better at execution. And we have efforts underway to improve our lab management with robotics and high throughput tools and the right balance of technical support to principal investigative, all of those things. In R&D, we're working on managing projects using flexible schedule, flexible tools, and application development. We continue to improve that design, build, test, analyze cycle, taking bottlenecks out one at a time as we identify them. We do manage an end-to-end innovation framework where, again, now we've formalized the scouting. I told you about the learning machine that lets us screen out 80 to 90% of the bad ideas before we ever staff them. We then use stage gate processes, and we have 3 different ones in different degrees of complexity for how complex the problem is. So we tried to not saddle everything with the full boat when we don't need it. And we've also started to add agile tools to our toolkit to be able to take those programs for which it seems ideally suited to make us faster and better at execution. So we're working across the continuum, and if I can indulge for just a minute, I'd like to talk about some of my own personal reflections on R&D management, at least in a materials company. I've been doing it now for a little over 30 years, And what I found is something that's been alluded to in this conference, but maybe not stressed as much as it probably needs to be, is get the right people. Recognize that the biggest breakthroughs often come from interdisciplinary teams. That's one of the recommendations of agile methodologies, of course, but making sure you have people that are talking to one another and are the best at what they do is the start. Then listen to them. The worst thing you can do is hire all these smart people and then say, yeah, but you got to go do this instead of what you really think we ought to be doing. Make your case. Help us understand why this ought to be what you should be doing, rather than just telling them they ought to go do more bread and butter programs. Obviously, carefully choosing the right problems and executing impeccably. That's what I've been talking about today, but I didn't want to let today get passed without stressing the people aspect to it. And if there's one maybe unique thing that I can add that maybe some of you knew, but I haven't heard discussed here yet, is courage. This is a cartoon, but I've collected over my years actual reflections on net present value over time of programs. And I can tell you that some of our best blockbuster products went through at least 2 and oftentimes 3 near-death experiences, because programs go between despair and euphoria as you run into new challenges or you solve them. And being somebody who can recognize that you have really good people who can solve really tough problems and let them work a problem, but at the same time recognizing that at a certain point, Mother Nature may tell you can't do something, and so you have to move on. So, to me, that's an element of judgment, and it is something that I think is maybe overlooked a lot of times. We talked about failing fast, we talked about learning fast. Both are important, but that's, I think, true if you're ultimately going to fail. You don't want to work on something that you know Mother Nature won't let you do, but at the same time, make sure that you're not throwing in the towel too early, because again, you could be leaving value on the table. So with that, I again really appreciate the opportunity for us to tell our story here today. We're going to spin in April through June, and we've done really hard work on focusing our investments on the right choices, on driving the upside for our projects, and freeing up resources so that we could staff projects for success. We're working hard on culture change. The new company will be called DuPont, and from here it's kind of up to you and our shareholders. So thank you.